Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Let's Talk Quantum webinar. My name is Jared Moulton, and I'm the Vice President of Udacity's consumer business. Since 2011, Udacity has built our reputation as a world-class AI learning platform. We specialize in helping professionals develop job-ready skills in tech's most in-demand fields. Last week, we launched a 1-hour Discovering Quantum Computing course taught by Matthew Versaggi. He's also one of our panelists today. The course will be available for free until August 12th. We'll spend the first 40 minutes in the panel discussion and then open the floor to questions. You can submit your questions in the Zoom chat. Today, I'm joined by Matthew Versaggi and Carl Dukatz. Matthew is the instructor of the Discovering Quantum Computing course. He's an advanced technology subject matter expert with Fortune 5 healthcare experience who has decades of experience as an entrepreneur, graduate-level university professor, and public speaker. He holds patents in quantum computing, machine learning, and cognitive technology. Matthew has recently been awarded an Office of the White House Presidential Innovation Fellowship, and he is stationed in Washington, D.C. for his appointment. Carl is a managing director at Accenture, leading the Next Generation Compute Group. His team of quantum information scientists, operational researchers, and cybersecurity experts create value for businesses by addressing their most challenging problems with new compute and algorithms. He's the 2024 Vice Chair for the Quantum Economic Development Consortium Use Case Technical Advisor Committee and a certified information systems security professional. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd love to start by better understanding what got you both interested in quantum computing. How did you begin your learning path, and how did you develop that learning path over time? Let's start with you, Matthew.
So early in 2018, I developed a curiosity just by reading about it online. It was unique. It was interesting. It fascinated me that computers could radically change from the binary way of doing computation to something completely different. And I realized at that point that that difference could change the world as we knew it. So I decided to kind of continue in earnest. May of 2008, I took my first course, Keio University in Japan. And that's where I was bitten by the bug. Took a number of courses after that, curated a small library of quantum computing books, began developing resources and code repositories on the subjects, and then began to develop and expand my knowledge from there. But it wasn't until I decided to introduce quantum computing at the Fortune 5 healthcare level that it really began to take root. Much of the early days were an evangelism front. And then I decided, and we needed a training program that could train software engineers in not physicists or mathematicians, but software engineers in the basics. We really needed it. It didn't exist. So it took 1.5 years out of my own life to develop that from scratch. And that enabled us to train software engineers in the basics, good solid basics of quantum computing for the next 3 years. Now, somewhere between all of that, I spoke at a quantum tech conference in Boston on the fusion of quantum computing and healthcare. And that's where I had really very good fortunate opportunity to meet Carl and make friends with Carl. Back to you.
Great. What about you, Carl? How did you get started with quantum computing?
Well, so the eye-opening moment for me was actually a little bit further in. So I had completed dozens of interviews with domain experts and compiled a list of 200 business applicable use cases for quantum computing. And that's when I realized how pervasive the technology could be. And so I didn't come to this right away. My journey started a little bit differently, where I was in one of our innovation labs at Accenture about a decade ago, and I was leading a team that was working on systems and platforms and high performance computing, mostly machine learning and analytics use cases. And much of this was software innovation, building on top of commodity hardware at the time. This was the trend of using Hadoop and big data which were becoming viable for enterprise. But some of it outside of the software was looking into hardware systems. And it was around this time that a few new algorithms came out for quantum computers, VQE and QAOA. And these They were being devised, and that was gaining interest in the circles that I was running, looking at algorithms and looking at new eras of hardware. And so I found this intriguing, and I shifted some of the research that I was doing and that my team was working on to answer the questions about how capable is this hardware, and is it viable, when it will be viable, and how transformative it would be. And that's what led to the study to figure out where the applications would be. And that's what, got me more involved and starting to attend conferences. I was learning by talking to hardware and software vendors, running code on simulators and creating applications and running benchmarks and listening to lectures and meeting people like Matt.
Super. Thanks both. I think that what's really interesting about that is it didn't happen kind of through this intentional path. You both kind of stumbled upon it, found your interest, and were able to grow and develop that interest into a career, which is really cool to hear. I'd love to move on to the next question, which I think is really important for a lot of our listeners and viewers today, which is how would you describe quantum computing to a layperson, and why is it important? Matthew, we'll start with you again.
Okay. So quantum computing at its core is computing using nature's subatomic particles, as opposed to artificial transistors stacked on a chip to do calculations. That's a big difference. And because of that, quantum computers compute differently. They use the phenomena of quantum physics rather than sort of the binary comparisons of one thing to another that classical computers do. Now, that difference enables quantum computers to address problems that classical computers just can't approach. And that's a big deal. It also marks the difference in how computers fundamentally work. That's also a huge deal. So quantum computers can take advantage of capabilities that just don't exist in the classical world. That's all the quantum capabilities that are out there. That changes the very nature of computers. Now, I think that's exciting because right now we're meeting the future right in front of us, and we should introduce ourselves. Back to you.
Carl, what do you have to add on top of that?
Yeah, I'll just add, I think you nailed it, Matt. I think I like to add some visuals or analogies to the descriptions. Like when he's talking about a qubit and a regular bit, a classical bit is like the top of my hand is facing up or down, my palm is up or down. But a quantum bit is more, I'm pointing my finger in any direction, and it inherently holds more information because it's a vector. It has a direction and a point, multiple points involved instead of just one or zero. And so that is inherently more powerful. And when you build a system on top of that, you can expect it to be more powerful in interesting ways. Another way to think about it is, say you are, it's the Halloween and you're going to go in a corn maze, for example, and it's easy to get lost in a corn maze. You don't know where you are, and you have to come up with strategies in order to get around the maze. But if you're solving the maze, say on the back of the newspaper, you have a bird's eye view of what that maze is, and you make decisions differently, and you can solve it more efficiently and more quickly. So that's another way to think about how computations work in a quantum computer. Another thing would be if you are trying to do something that's practical, like level a shelf. You can measure from the floor to the point on a wall and the floor to another point, and then try and get your shelf to be level. And that's what you would have to do classically, or in the quantum world, you could just put a ball on the shelf and see where the ball rolls. And if it rolls off, the shelf's not level, and you can see which direction it rolled, and that gives you more information. So I think that there's some problems that take a lot of work to solve on classical computers, and that's what's challenging. But if we look at the tools that quantum gives us with superposition, entanglement, and tunneling, so long as we can control them properly, we can let the physics do the work for us and just measure the outcome and come to awesome conclusions much more efficiently.
Super helpful to understand that. And I think maybe what would be even more helpful or on top of that is, what's an example of a problem that a quantum computer can solve more effectively than a classical computer, just to help some of our watchers really understand the power of the quantum computer? Carl, why don't you take that one?
Sure. So I think the easiest problem to think about is encryption, because the way that we do encryption today, we're simply multiplying two numbers together, and then it's very difficult to reverse those two numbers, or get those two numbers back from the number we multiplied them into. And that is a thing that will take our computers today billions and billions of years to solve. And that's what protects all of our internet communications today. However, in this simple factoring of those prime numbers we use in our encryption today, a quantum computer can analyze the search space and find those efficiently, which is not something that anyone really was planning on or expecting, and it's going to be a big disruption for us. But that's the simplest thing, is just multiplying two numbers together to get another number, and you can't go back. And with a quantum computer, you now can. And I think that a lot of times people confuse quantum computing with big data, and they think you need big data and there are hard problems, and hard problems only come with big data. That's not really the case. Hard problems manifest themselves in many different ways, and they can be as simple as just three numbers.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. Definitely something that Matthew touches on in his video or in his course, Discovering Quantum Computing, and something that we'll talk about a little bit more later on. Why is it important for business leaders to become more familiar with quantum computing and its capabilities? I'll start with you on this one, Carl.
Yeah, the rationale varies from industry to industry. For example, chip manufacturers are going to have different reasons to keep track of quantum computing over, say, maybe a logistics company, because it's inherently their business. However, there's ultimately every business, it has a digital core, and that digital core is what they use to operate their business and maintain competitive advantage, operational efficiency, or cybersecurity. And so these directly impact the cost benefits and the revenues of those businesses. And therefore, business leaders have to be aware of disruptions to any of those things. And once they have a general understanding of how they can be disrupted, then they move into the next phase of understanding how to prevent that disruption with things like talent acquisition and collaborative partnerships, or even what are the ethical and social or societal considerations that come along with using new technology. And getting people to that point, business leaders to that point, so they can make informed decisions, is incredibly important. And so one other piece of this is that the quantum economy is still at a very early stage, and it needs participants. And so the more people who are aware, the more business leaders that get informed, who have familiarity with this, will be more empowered to make better choices and to engage the ecosystem where they need, with both business and academics. And so I think there's a lot of reasons for business leaders to get involved and understand its capabilities.
Excellent. Do you have anything to add on top of that, Matthew?
I do. That's a great foundation to build on. I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. As we look at the world around us, we see a global technology arms race ensuing across the globe. We see acceleration of the speed of innovation across industries. Example, AI, you got biotech, you got nanotech, quantum techs on the tail end of that, and a host of other disruptive technologies. It's part of this thing we call the VUCAD world: virtual, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous, and digital. It's an acronym that describes a very harsh environment that organizations are going to have to learn to live in. And that's the process we call becoming future ready. So this means that organizations have to be super proactive in ferreting out these advanced signals indicating the emergence of disruptive technologies on the event horizon, and their estimated arrival times and their strategic implications for the overall organization. Quantum is one of those technologies in that portfolio. So you have to develop this appropriate competencies to effectively engage in that, learn how to commit the proper investment levels, and capably govern the implementation of those in your organization. It's also important to look at that there's a heavy latency involved in getting attached to this space. And that's for organizations looking to both adopt quantum computing, organizations on that side, and individuals looking to break in this space. So it's going to require time and investment. And Carl talked about the security implications and things like that. And yeah, I think that's probably my take on advancement of that conversation.
I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. And you both have experience working, with industry leaders, with government, having these conversations about how to prioritize quantum, against potentially other investment opportunities. What are those conversations like? What's your recommendation when you're having those conversations in terms of, hey, you need to have this type of level of quantum investment, recognizing that, it may take some time to, see some of the outcomes from the results of that investment?
Carl, we're going to give you high honors for that.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a delicate balance that So one of the groups that we're working closely with right now is the World Economic Forum on this particular topic. And the stance that we've taken is we need to make sure that quantum is accessible and available to everyone, everyone. And so we've taken steps to make sure that the initiatives run through that forum, uh, allow for people, even if their country isn't developing the technology directly, to understand what it's going to be capable of and to interact with the technology through web services and accessibility online so that they are not caught flat-footed and they're not unaware of what's going on. And so, we take pride in making sure that people understand and then have the power to make decisions about what investments they are going to make. Now, a lot of this right now is still very interconnected around the globe. There are things that are only manufactured in certain places, and supply chains are very dependent on one another. But there is also legislation that is coming out that's restricting certain exports of certain combinations of systems and devices because of there is a risk factor to quantum computers at a certain scale, and we have to accept and be honest about that too. And I think people are aware and taking the appropriate precautions.
Yeah, let me add on to that. I think that's another great foundation to build on. So at the enterprise level, it's going to take more time and effort than I think is currently being recognized to get into the space. Additionally, and Carl's alluding to that directly, the threat factor of quantum computing event horizon might actually be a little closer than anticipated. And we've got policies and legislations looking to kind of mitigate that. That's because of the global technology arms race, right? All of these technologies are beginning to work together. They're also improving the chances that rogue organizations and nation states could create legitimate threats to classical encryption technologies before private industry does. So there's that concern to kind of throw on top of the heap in those discussions.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic for organizations to think about, particularly in terms of defense against some of these, potential encryption threats that we've talked about, but then also in terms of the general investment for other use cases. I think those are the other use cases is definitely one that, I'm still trying to understand what they look like and, what might come about. And I think that's something that we'll figure out in time. One thing that Carl mentioned, during I think in his initial response here was the consideration of ethics as part of a quantum computing strategy or roadmap. A couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, we had another webinar on the ethics of AI that I thought was really interesting. And I'd love to just hear, your initial take as to how ethics play into quantum computing and maybe some of the frameworks that you think about when you're having those discussions.
Carl, you want high honors on that, or you want me to?
You can start this one.
So, so we face the ethical consideration in AI as it's across the board. In fact, it's becoming a cottage industry, which is always a concern because then it becomes when you start making money off of an industry, then it takes on a life of its own and begins to have its own gravity. And ethics definitely is doing it. It's also a mature space. Like when AI kind of will pave the road for that because and it has. It's almost a decade old when you think about all of the effort that's going into that. Frameworks and structures are being developed from NIST to the MITRE framework to many others. There's courses becoming certified in AI ethics and algorithm auditing and all of these kinds of things. So that paves the way for an ethics conversation, but it's also getting mature. On the quantum side, I think the ethical conversations can be around access. How do we get people from underserved communities to have the same level of access so that they can learn at the same rate that the rest of the world does? And that's an important conversation to have because we know that when a new technology is adopted by the winners, whoever that may be, they tend to turn around and exploit that with the lesser constituencies out there. So we know that pattern exists. It's been happening since the beginning of time. So we want to kind of thwart that. Carl, over to you, sir.
Yeah, I think that the use of the devices follows a lot of patterns that we see in AI already, and that it is a compute hardware, right? And so the way that you use the hardware is where the ethical concerns come into play. And so a lot of the use that is probably people are considering mostly will fall in line with what we decide to do with AI as well. And AI is ahead of the curve right now. And so it's kind of writing the rule book for when we use quantum computers to make even more advanced AI, then likely the ethical decisions will follow the previous decisions that we've made with how that technology should happen. The other piece of it, outside of just the AI decision, is you can't just use a supercomputer today for whatever you want, right? They monitor who accesses it, they understand which use cases are being run on it, and they very closely, whether it's a cloud service or an on-prem service, people are very considerate, and the owners of these devices are orchestrate their access and control very meticulously. And so I imagine we'll see some of that come into play as well to make sure that there isn't misuse.
Gotcha. So to summarize both of your responses, it sounds like, one, we think that the ethical considerations here are going to likely follow a lot of what we learn and develop on the AI side. Two, access is definitely, a big topic of conversation. We see that in AI as well. But I think here it's compounded, even just considering the limited nature of these supercomputers. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would say so. Unless you have something that and we start and see these that begin to be done at room temperature, that will open up the threat vector quite a lot. And
what does that mean?
Most quantum computers are in large refrigeration units, and you just can't have one in your spare bedroom. But if you begin to have the technology that can operate at room temperature, now all of a sudden that threat vector opens up because it can be done inexpensively and at scale. When that happens, then you have some real concerns out there.
Yeah, this is important to understand. There's not just one way to build a quantum computer. There's many different ways. Some, require large dilution refrigerators where you freeze something to colder than interstellar space and then shoot microwaves around it. Another one is you trap ions in a little bow tie device and shoot them with lasers. Another is you squeeze light as it's as it's moving over a certain type of material device, and then that creates the quantum effects as well. And so there are many different ways to build the devices, and we don't yet know which one will be the first to be the best or be able to do things that classical computers can't do yet.
Yep. And classical computers followed that same trajectory. We had mechanical, hydraulic, electric, we had vacuum tubes, we had solid state transistors until we got to silicon chips. So that pattern's already established.
How far away do you think we are from having quantum computing at scale, or an answer there? Do we know?
Carl, you have high honors on this one.
Matt,
So, yeah,
this is in the questions.
This is a good question. So you can access a quantum computer, and it does solve problems, small scale problems. There are companies out there that are selling quantum computers, and some other businesses are saying we're using them in production today. I don't think that is a popular decision, but I think it is happening at a very, very, very small scale. I think that the majority of devices available today are for research and for discovering new how to build better quantum computers, how to write better algorithms for those computers. And that's where the major focus is today. And that's where I spend a lot of my time, is understanding the devices today and showing how you can run future applications on them without, pushing for those to be in production. And I can give a bunch of examples, like in resources, we did bitumen extraction, optimization. We've done battery chemistry. We've done disruption of PFAS molecules, power scheduling, demand management, vehicle to grid charging. In financial services, we've looked at fraud detection, risk analysis, portfolio optimization, reinsurance. In manufacturing and logistics, there's supply chain, last mile delivery, aircraft loading, production scheduling, vehicle sensor positioning, rail networks, and it goes on and on in different ways that you can use these devices today at a very, very small scale. You take your big business problem and you keep chopping it down until you get to a point where you can run something on a quantum computer. And then you have the roadmap on what to add back as the quantum computers scale, and you can eventually, as we're hoping, as the technology evolves, start to replace some of the systems that you would use in production with more efficient quantum devices.
Now, that's a key part, evolving. So AI is one of those technologies that evolves, right? Quantum will evolve too. And you have to look at it at its current state of evolution, but then project out what the roadmap is of it maturing. So there's all kinds of things that would exist in a normal, mature programming environment that just don't yet exist in the quantum space, like quantum RAM, quantum operating system, a quantum IDE, a whole bunch of these other things. But they're on the roadmap and they're dependent upon the basic science to improve. Once that happens, all this pent-up capabilities and demand are going to come rushing through. And then you're going to see the acceleration of innovation in that space. But the linchpin right now is going to be basic science, material science, and physics to get those things going. But once they do, there's a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of people massing at the border, metaphorically speaking, and they're going to go rushing in and things can happen extraordinarily quickly.
Yeah, I think just based on some of the comments Carl just made, I mean, there's just a slew of use cases across businesses and industries. So excited to see what happens once we get the science down. To keep us moving here, Matthew, in your course, you speak to the intersection between AI and quantum computing. Can you share a personal example of a time you've used AI to improve a quantum output or use quantum to expedite an AI system, or both?
So to answer that, I once took a quantum machine learning from University of Toronto, which was just a brutal class, but it was really good. We looked at a lot of esoteric side on the research side of that, where quantum computing is helping in the machine learning space. Much of that was theoretical. On the practical side, though, and I'll toss this to Carl in a minute, what you'll see about quantum computing is helping machine learning operations on the neural net. When you're dealing with neural network weight adjustments, they tend to adjust their weights as they begin to learn, right? The techniques of reducing that error rate can be improved upon when using classical algorithms as opposed to classical quantum algorithms as opposed to classical algorithms. But I'd like to open up the aperture of this just a little bit to include quantum-inspired innovations as well, because that's beginning to enter the conversation too. So we've observed a really interesting relationship phenomena, so to speak, between quantum-inspired classical methods and actual quantum computational solutions themselves that kind of require a double click to look into it. So we've got these quantum-inspired classical methods done on a classical machine whose inspiration for that algorithm came from its doppelganger on the quantum side. And what we're finding is that there's this back and forth relationship where the quantum-inspired solution actually performs a little better. And then the quantum solution gets a little better and it performs a little better. And you've got this sort of back and forth kind of a thing, wash, rinse, and repeat. And that's a great thing to see, because the whole domain begins to help itself get better and better and better of a number of different technologies, AI included. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we'll see, that all these things work together for the mutual benefit of each of those. So Carl, I'm going to throw that to you, sir.
Yeah, I think just to add, the best example of that is the Google quantum supremacy experiment. So this was done, I think, in 2019, where they showed, okay, a quantum computer can do something better than the fastest supercomputer on the planet. And then a few days or weeks later, the supercomputer owners came back and said, well, actually, we retuned our supercomputer and it can be just almost as efficient. And then a few years later, another team came out with another quantum computer and showed that they could do it better, right? And so there is this back and forth between what can be done classically and what can be done on a quantum computer. And there's no denying that a quantum computer for this particular problem could do it better. But that problem doesn't necessarily translate in anything that we can do usefully for business today. And so that's why quantum supremacy is one term, but quantum advantage or quantum economic advantage is really what we're looking for, is a useful way to use the machines to do that. And just on the quantum AI side, I'll just point out one other thing is, one time a company asked us they thought they had a breakthrough and they asked us to review their work on a machine learning algorithm they had created that could write quantum circuits so that quantum computers could run as efficiently as possible. And what we found is that the machine learning algorithm was just training the quantum computer to do classical things because it didn't really understand quantum physics. And so I would just be careful as to, what you see and what's coming out, and make sure it goes through the research process and it's fully vetted and it's backed when you see announcements about quantum and AI coming together, because it's not as simple as people may make it seem.
Sounds like a lot of AI today has been trained on classical computing. So just kind of bridging that gap to quantum will require it to work more with quantum and learn from quantum and, build on quantum. And so I think that makes a ton of sense. Carl, I'd love to stick with you on the next one, which is, in your world at Accenture, what's an example of a real world quantum business problem your team has worked on?
Yeah, so I mentioned a bunch of them earlier. So those are all things that we've worked on. I'll just highlight one quickly. There was a recent challenge that was put out by the city of Calgary in Canada, and their objective was to understand advantages that could be applied in the energy sector, especially to smart charging, tail end treatment, and bitumen viscosity. And so we tackled this bitumen viscosity, the tail ending treatment of the bitumen viscosity problem. And we used something called a hybrid quantum neural network, which is a machine learning based approach, to devise a novel way that we could reduce the time and cost associated with finding the best combination of flowagulants and coagulants needed to remediate the water, or essentially make it so that you use less water when extracting this asphalt from earth in order to mine asphalt essentially. And by optimizing that water amount, you obviously reduce waste, but you also prevent the soil from being corrupted in different ways that could lead to essentially bad outcomes, whether it is sinkholes or causing the land to be disruptive in other ways. So this was a really interesting problem. We take up these challenges because we feel like they're tech for good purposes that can ultimately make the environment better and still benefit humanity. And so that's one of the recent ones that we worked on.
It's a great example. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing the other examples throughout the conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of, the encryption threat that quantum poses. And Matthew talks about this a bit more in the course as well, how quantum can be dangerous. So what are you seeing being done to address these risks in your work? What needs to be true to either mitigate or eliminate this risk? Matthew, I'd love to start with you on this one, and then Carl would love to hear from you afterwards.
So you can mitigate risk all over, but you can't eliminate it. There's no way to ensure that something won't happen. Any good, compliance or security guy will tell you that. So we're firmly relegated to the mitigation space. Now, in that though, the biggest risk is getting caught sleeping, which is the main aim of the bad guys, right? On the fronts of encryption, authentication, protection of protocols, authentication protocols, and harvest now, decrypt later kinds of fronts for sensitive information of key industries like healthcare, financial, governmental, and military institutions. So awareness and monitoring of those key metrics indicating the maturity of certain important innovations in the quantum space is necessary for every senior executive to be aware of. In fact, their office is fiduciarily responsible to safeguard the assets of their organizations and ought to be held accountable for that if they fail to do so. So that's one thing. Next, future-ready organizations are thinking along that. They understand where that's going, should be constructing roadmaps to inject and maintain quantum-resistant encryption capabilities for the organization at scale. Now, that's no small task by any stretch of imagination. These guys ought to be discussing investment, resource allocations appropriately applied to those fronts, begin enacting action plans to get experience, organizational traction on that front. Good start is looking at the NIST and other agencies' recommendations. The ATARC also has some very good ones as well. Carl, I'm going to throw this back to you.
Yeah, very, very well put, Matt. I don't know if I'll add a little bit on the technical side. So technically, as you mentioned, there's a threat of steal now, decrypt later, harvest now, decrypt later that is happening today. Someone can sniff your Wi-Fi or tap into your fiber and steal your data and sit on it. And then when there's a future quantum computer, then they can break it into it and see it. The other thing, which is even worse, is when that computer exists and people can spoof identities. And then everything on the internet just becomes insecure. You don't know who's who. You don't know. You can't trust anyone on the internet. That breaks all commerce and communications down in a very bad way. And so we know of 3 ways to protect against this. The first is there's some cryptography that's vulnerable, asymmetric cryptography, which goes back to that factoring thing that we were talking about earlier. And then there's symmetric cryptography, which doesn't use factoring, and that's not vulnerable to the types of attack we expect. And so you can't switch to that in every single system. It's not scalable in the way that we need it to be for the way the internet operates. And so what we did is NIST ran a competition and invented, people invented and shared those new algorithms with NIST, and then they evaluated them and said, okay, now we have these new algorithms that do the same thing that we need for asymmetric cryptography. So let's go replace all the cryptography across the internet and across all businesses and across all systems, all the billions and billions of devices with those. And so that's the second option. And then the third option is to use quantum communications, which is, we talked a little bit about entanglement earlier, or if you took the course, you'll learn about it, where you entangle 2 qubits, and when you spread them apart, then they maintain their connection. And if someone tries to intercept those or eavesdrop those, you can detect that they have been intercepted. And so that inherently protects against this eavesdropping threat that I was talking about. And so, but this requires us to implement all new hardware everywhere. So those are the solutions in place. And I'll just let you know, I recently scanned the top 1 million websites on the internet and found that 24% of them actually already have the second solution enabled, this post-quantum cryptography. Even though the standards aren't out yet, the finalist algorithms have been selected, and some enterprising companies like Cloudflare have gone and put them in place. And Cloudflare hosts 20% of the internet. And so them putting it in place has added protection to many people. But this is just for their websites. The other side of that is all our clients, the systems that we're using to browse the internet today. So Edge, Chrome, Firefox, they've added protections as well. So when we're going to those 20% of the websites, we're actually already using post-quantum cryptography. And so it's probably on your computer right now, or on your phone, or on your device. In fact, people who are watching this Zoom live, Zoom has added post-quantum cryptography to Zoom. So you're using it right now if you're watching this. And so that's a pretty good thing to know. But the problem is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the internet that we see. There's so much of the internet that we don't see that's out there that Matthew's talking about, that is really that provides all this functionality that we use as societies today, that needs to be protected. And it would be irresponsible not to go investigate and figure out ways to make sure all of that is upgraded. And if you're interested in exploring this a bit more, I put a site up. It's called isitquantumsafe.info, and you can go to that, and it'll check your browser. You can check websites. You can search a database of products that are out there, and start your learning experience with that.
Can you say that website one more time, just so folks can catch it?
Sure. Isitquantumsafe.info.
Awesome. Great answer. Really appreciate you guys sharing that. I know we're getting close to time on the questions for the audience, and I don't want to eat into the Q&A too much. So I do want to just end with one final question. When you look at the sphere of quantum, what business problem or challenge are you most excited about seeing solved over the next 10, 15 years? Start with you, Matthew.
So I'm in the healthcare space, so I like all those kinds of things. So I like the space of genetics and genomics. I like systems biology. I like the idea that new medicines that can be developed to help rare diseases, to help cure rare diseases, which is a plague on the planet. The thought of personalized medicine at scale really excites me, and I'm excited to see quantum computing move the needle on that. I also have lots of super smart friends, but some super smart friends in the quantum chemistry space. You know who you are. who often bake my noodle with the kinds of problems they're working on where quantum computing plays a really big role. Those are fascinating, and engage all kinds of basic science fronts from there. So those are the things that excite me.
Thanks, Matthew. Carl.
Yeah, I agree that the chemistry side is really the one that interests me, and yes, the health side too. But when I think of using quantum computers to address some of the UN Sustainability Development Goals, are really noble causes. So room temperature superconductors could change the way we use energy and we travel. New methods for nitrogen fixation could help with the ozone depletion problem that we have, and other problems that I've worked on directly, like breaking down PFAS and removing pollutants from the environment. I think that these have very wonderful things that can help humanity across the whole globe.
Excellent. Well, hey, thanks so much, both of you, for all the questions from me. With that, we're going to move on to questions from the audience. So I'm going to move down the list of questions that our moderator has collected. Apologies if we don't get to some of the amazing audience questions that have been submitted. Definitely after the webinar, we'll put this up on YouTube and do our best to follow up with Carl and Matthew and make sure that we get your questions answered. So I'll start with this one. What is the best way for engineers to start experimenting with quantum computing? For example, for ML, we can get an NVIDIA Jetson board and experiment with AI computing.
Carl, you want to take first stab honors at that?
Yeah, so interestingly, you don't necessarily need a quantum computer to experiment with quantum computing. There are tons of simulators out there that are available, so you can download the toolkits and run them locally on your machine and simulate a small-scale quantum computer. You can add attributes like the noise that a real computer would have, and or you can run it without noise and see what the algorithms are capable of solving when they are able to work on future quantum computers. And there's really a vibrant open source community that allows you to access and get that running. And then there's also many other sites that allow you to experiment and explore through IDEs on websites. There's IBM, there's QBraid, there's StrangeWorks. These are all places that you can go that allow access to algorithms and runtimes and some of the free quantum computers or some of the paid for quantum computers through those interfaces too. So if you're interested in getting going, I recommend a lot of those.
Matthew, do you have anything to add on top of that?
Not much. That was as comprehensive as it gets. I mean, I think the key thing is that you learn from this free simulators. You all of your initial low cost learning and very effective learning to get the basics down, which is really the hardest part, is making that transition from classical to quantum. It takes a little while. There's a lot of transition vulnerability involved in that. But once you get that down, then you can actually move into actual quantum hardware. And there's a big leap from that, because quantum hardware, as opposed to the simulators, is one big change, right? The simulators allow you to inspect interim results. Quantum hardware does not. That's a massive difference in the educational and experiential realms of those areas. Much of your significant learning goes from interrogating those interim results that the simulators will give you, whereas and you need that to get the skills, so that once you get on real hardware, you understand where those mistakes are coming from, and you can cut the learning down to quite a bit.
And maybe I missed it, but what are some names of the simulators that our audience can check out?
Carl, I'm throwing that to you.
So I think one of the most popular toolkits right now is Qiskit from IBM. There's also Circ from Google. That is a wonderful toolkit as well. And I think that those are, and then there's also the Microsoft version with, I think, Q Sharp and they have Azure access and tools online as well with Microsoft Quantum. So you can find many different resources. That's just a couple, but there are many more.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. We'll move to the next question. And Carl, I'm going to give this one to you. So given quantum computing's potential to solve complex environmental issues faster than classical computers, how do we balance this with its own significant energy consumption and carbon footprint? Are there initiatives to ensure that the environmental benefits of quantum outweigh its operational costs?
So the fascinating thing about quantum computers is that they don't necessarily require more energy. So if you think about one single chip, doing the work that an entire supercomputer can do on one problem, you're actually reducing the amount of energy to getting to a solution. And so the dilution refrigerator, say running a quantum processor, doesn't actually cost a lot to run. I mean, there's some energy so that the pumps can keep the system cool, but otherwise it's just one chip in a big kind of case, so to speak. And so there's actually some energy benefits that people are hoping that we will have with different quantum computers, especially some of the photonics devices as well, where we think there'll be very strong gains in energy usage and consumption for solving gnarly hard problems.
Great, thanks. How can we enter the field? We, I suppose, is the audience, plural. How can we start from the bottom to the high level to start our careers in this field? And I'll kick that to Matthew.
So I don't know if there'll be as much starting as transitioning. So typically you'll have software engineers who want to transition into this space. A lot of getting into this space depends on where you're coming from. So if you're a software engineer, it's fairly clear. If you're a physicist, it's different. If you're a mathematician, and all three of those are going to want to be involved in this space, they'll have different initial trajectories. Ultimately, to really flourish in this space, you're going to need a little bit of three. But so there's where you start kind of dictates what your path is. So that's one side of that coin. The other one is that there are two camps right now that you have to consider. If you bifurcate quantum computing into the consumer versus producer group, the producers make the tech. That's the dominant group right now. And it always has been, even in the classical computer stage. You know, when they started building them, everybody was around making it. But then it got good and it got efficient and it moved to the consumer. So those two groups, the underserved group is the consumer right now. So you've got the producers who are scientists who are making technology, and then you've got ultimately later on the consumers who are going to be using it in domains that are specific, like healthcare and finance and defense, that you'll need. They're not going to be looking for pure scientists. They're going to be looking for engineers and that have deep domain experience and can be kind of upticked or upskilled in that space. So there's a lot of ways to get into this.
What are some specific resources? You know, is there a book? Is there a YouTube channel? Is there a website? You know, like where can folks start here?
So there's a lot of them. The question is, which is right for you?
Okay.
And that's a big question, because when I first started picking up quantum computing books, and Carl, I can imagine you had the same experience. You open it up, and there's 50 pages of math, and you're like, close the book, I'm done. I like databases. And so you see a lot of that kind of thing happening. And the reason is because the first forerunners who started getting in the educational space were hardcore techs. Most people didn't want that avenue into the space. They wanted a different one. And that's why, you know, we developed that took a year and a half to create something specifically for an underserved group of people that the mathematicians were kind of pushing off. And that worked. And so find out which is right for you. There's a ton of software engineers, I think, that are going to go, I want to get into this space. And their trajectory is, I would rather learn the software engineering techniques and the strong conceptual underpinnings that I can apply to any platform, rather than I need to have this bulk of opaque mathematics or physics that I need to understand before I'm allowed to do this. And so that's going to change too. So you'll see more getting into this sort of software engineer friendly place. Carl, thoughts on that?
I definitely agree with everything you said there, Matt. The one piece that I'll add is you can think of it in steps, regardless of where you're coming from. If you're coming from the industry side, or if you're coming from another place, where you need to get your awareness up first. What's going on? What's happening? And then once you've moved, after you've kind of got a cursory view and you understand where to go and who's at play, then you start to converse. And once you become conversant, you're able to have conversations, think about use cases, understand which methods or which computer you may use for it, you know, at which level you find interesting, right? So you may want to know which algorithm to use, or you may just want to know which computer to use because there's different types, or you know, you may not care about any of that and just care about the outcomes, and you seek to know what the machine can produce that matters to you. All of that is relevant in this space right now because it's not saturated. We need people doing all of those things, looking at it in any way that they're interested in it and contributing to the conversation. And then once you feel conversant, that's when you can move more into a job ready or a stage where you're like, I want to learn this specific skill. I want to be a quantum information scientist or a program developer, or I want to apply my specialty, which could be in any field, to and use a quantum device to go solve a problem and have someone else engineer it for me, but just be a user of it. And I think that there's plenty of opportunity to do all those things.
There's one more point I want to make on that, because that's an excellent foray, is that this idea that technology is the only way to go. And it's a big space. So I'm a quantum strategist as well, work with QSI. There's a whole bunch of quantum strategists in that space, and that's a business-oriented function. The same thing with AI strategy. We take technology out of the conversation. We go, hey, here's a business here. What are those things that are going to make the business or domain, whether it's elementary particle physics or whether it's finance or whether it's medicine, get better? And that's a strategic conversation. So technology is only one part. It's a big part right now. But as we saw in computers, classical computers, that was a big part initially, and then it moved into the hands of the consumer. And then that moved into all kinds of domains. The larger portion of the involvement, the heavy investment, really big ballooning of investment went later when the consumers got it. So that's to be considered as well. There's lots of sales and marketing and all of the things that make a business run in the ecosystem of quantum. All are necessary.
You can always go back to school too and learn the physics behind it as well. That is absolutely an option. And there's wonderful universities happy to teach you.
Yeah.
So, speaking for myself as a layperson in this field, and I mentioned this to Carl and Matthew earlier before the webinar started, I asked, what's the difference between quantum computing and quantum physics? And Carl's response was, there's no difference. It's actually the same. And I thought that was a good aha moment for me to kind of understand that, all of this is really part of the same conversation. Matthew, you talked about access to quantum computing being a challenge in leveraging this technology. Will this technology end up being limited to a few major companies who scale bringing this technology to market?
So I think quantum's going to follow the same trajectory classical computation did, right? You get your IBMs, your big technology construction creation companies. They mature technology and it goes out of, but eventually when it becomes mature to a certain extent, there's a seminal event out there that will take it out of the data center, so to speak, in terms of classical computing and into the hands of the common man. And that's when personal computers began to emerge on the landscape. Quantum computing is going to follow that same process, that same trajectory. We just don't know what those seminal events are, and we don't know how long those time frames are. But we have a pattern that exists already in the classical world that gives us a roadmap. And we firmly expect, and I think for good reason that can be argued, quantum's going to follow the same route.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Carl, do you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I think that you can think about it in a couple of different ways. Do I have to own a piece of hardware to be able to use it or to consider it my own? And I think that a lot of the world now has shifted to accepting that we can run a lot of things in the cloud. Businesses can operate in the cloud. It's in certain scenarios, it's better to de-risk it and let someone else manage it and have that paradigm be viable. And so that is the easiest way to drive the growth of these systems that aren't readily available, aren't easily installed, and cost some money to put in place, but allowing access and everyone to benefit from it. And there hasn't been a quantum computer yet that hasn't that we haven't been able to access. If we go talk to someone and we ask them and we say we like to experiment or explore, everyone is interested and willing to get users on their systems and to get engaged. And so I think that now is a wonderful time to learn and to evolve with the ecosystem, to build the relationships. If you're concerned about that, to go build the relationship with the company, understand how they work and how they operate, the ethics that they're putting in place behind the technology and the care that they're putting into developing it is also something that is evident when you go work with them.
Thanks both. This goes back to, I think, the question about resources and learning more about quantum computing, but is a little bit more specific on, the job application of it. What's the present job market for quantum-based technology like? What are the skills required if I want to get into it?
Carl, over the fence to you.
Yeah. So there's quantum information science, there's quantum application development, algorithm development, there's theory, there's quantum solution architecture or quantum application solution architecture, and then there's cybersecurity and all the folks who are looking into post-quantum cryptography or quantum communications and protection. There's specializations within that. That's mostly the compute side. There's specializations within communications and specializations within quantum sensing as well. All of these things, they use quantum effects, but they require a very different view of how to implement, how to build, and the purpose that you're using it for. And while there's some overlap in the high level education, the specifics are very specific to the use case, and you have to dive into those pieces carefully. And so if you're interested, I know that the Quantum Economic Development Consortium lists jobs on their site or internships or listings, and there's, I believe, several hundreds of listings out there, and you can browse through that and see the skills that people are looking to hire for right now.
On building on that perspective, it's important to note the maturity of the domain right now, which is based on the maturity of the basic science, which is maturing on its own trajectory. But the types of problems that we can solve now are kind of really heavily restricted to those that are quantum friendly, or that you can force them to be friendly, or you can tear them apart and find little parts of them that you can make quantum friendly or force them to be friendly. Given that, the kinds of jobs that are required for that level of maturity will be of a certain aperture. When that matures, the aperture of all of that matures, the kinds of problems that we can solve also grows. The jobs that are required to solve those will also grow in kind. I mean, less than a decade ago, nobody knew what, Android development was like, because you didn't think you could put a computer on a phone. So we have to understand the maturity level of where it is now and what's available now, but understand that's a flowing river that will never be the same. And as the technology grows and the aperture of the problems that we can solve grows, so do the jobs that we don't have names yet for that will be manning those positions.
Well, I really appreciate the great conversation from both of you. Certainly appreciate both of your time giving to us and to our audience today. We have one question left, which I think is probably for me, which is, will there be more courses on this topic at Udacity? And the answer to that is that, if you like what you saw in the Discovering Quantum Computing course taught by Matthew Versaggi, and you like the level of content that we're providing through a number of other topics, whether it be AI, whether it be ML, whether it be programming, there may be a good demand for introducing even more quantum content in the future. And so my answer there is stay tuned. With that, thanks so much to everybody who joined us. Thanks again to Carl. Thanks again to Matthew. And hope everybody has a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, man.